So what are we talking about today, Pete?
Well, I was asked by a number of people about sharpening power saws, and I thought it would be interesting for everybody, but particularly for those that only use their power saws a little bit about maintenance on the power saw. So I'm going to talk about and show what I do daily and weekly with my power saws, because I use them every day. And I have my two main saws right here. This is my saw that I use for felling and limbing, and this one's a little bit bigger and a little bit heavier, and I use it for what we call junking or bucking up the trees into logs, studwood, and we used to do pulpwood too, but now we don't. This is a 565 Husqvarna, and it's the one that I use for junking up the logs after I haul them out. It's quite a lot heavier, and it's more powerful. Doesn't spin up quite as high, but it's really torquey. In other words, it won't bog down in big logs when I'm junking them up. This one is a very high sped, and it's got nice soft springs, so when you're limbing all day, you're not going to get your wrists really tired, and it's adequate for all the timber I have. I have some fairly large trees, and it has all kinds of power. It's a 62cc. It's called a 562 XPG, and the little bonus it has, there's a switch over here that I turn on in the wintertime, and it heats the handles. I can't get one with air conditioning. I haven't been able to get one of those yet. So these are the things I use daily. This is my power saw file for the teeth. This is for what we call the drags. We file the drags down every so often. Actually, I do it every 3 filings. I keep track of that. These are the wrenches for adjusting your chain. This is a putty knife, but I use it for cleaning, and I'll show that. I'll show how to use all these while we're making this little video. I use this is a soft shoe brush, and I use that for one type of filter that you can't really put in water. And this is a grease gun, and some people don't believe in this anymore, but I do this every day. I put a couple shots of grease into the tip of my chainsaw bar. You also put a little shot into your clutch when you change chains. The first thing I do every day before I do anything else, I check and see the tension of the chain, and it shouldn't be that loose. That's after I cut quite a few trees with quite a few limbs. So what I do for that is just adjust it up, and I'll explain how tight you should have it. You can't tighten your chain up with it sit in the way it normally sits, because the bar will drop, and then it gives you a false sense of how tight the chain is. So you just tighten it up until it comes in and touches the bar. You can pull it off the bar, rotate freely, and tighten these back up, because when you forget to tighten them back up, all of a sudden your bar and chain will fall off. So when your chain is tight enough, it'll come to a stop slowly. It won't stop instantly. If it's too tight, it'll come to a stop instantly when you release the throttle. When your chain gets warm, when you've been working in warm weather, there'll be a little bit of a sag to it, and that's okay. You don't want it too tight, because you'll wreck the tip and you'll wreck your clutch. The next thing I do is I take my grease gun, and there's a little hole at the end of the tip on all blades. It's not just these replaceable blades. And I just give it a couple of shots. You can see the grease coming out around there. I'll put a little too much on just so you can see it on the video. There's the grease showing. So I just go until I can see, because you know that as soon as that spins, it'll hit all the spots. And that greases the little bearing in there, and it lubricates this area, which is where the high pressure occurs during the action. Some people don't believe in that anymore. They say the chain oil will do it. The chain oil won't, because it's spinning out. It's not spinning in. Alright, so I use this vise, and I also have one of these set up on the toolbox that I take to the woods. It's just a lot easier than try to hold it in your hand. So for a file, this chain and the most typical size is a 7/32 file. But almost all the really good chains that you buy now have a little line on them, and you might be able to focus in on this. There's a line right there, and that line is supposed to be parallel to your cutting edge. What I do is I just use that line there, and when I file, I go parallel to that line, and I check and make sure my face, the cutting part of my tooth, is parallel to that line. That's important. So here's what I do. You can feel when you file, you can feel if it's dull or not. This one just needs a little touch, probably doesn't even need 2 swipes. And the guide stops the file from going too deep. People that try to go freehand often go too far down. And you should have that, should be just about half. It should be like a half moon. It shouldn't be a really deep, it should be just about a half moon. And I can't describe that any easier than that. So I'll file this one. We'll do the whole thing. You know, if your file is good, if it's not dragging any, you know you need to change files. These, we call these the drags. Some people call them the rakers. Those little things ahead of your tooth are just as important as your tooth. They are the depth control. So they let the saw know how far down into the wood to go. So that's filing your drags. You don't file very much. And I take and run it down a little bit to round it off to make it a little smoother, and it makes a difference. So if you file those down too much, your power saw will dig in too much. And it also makes it more dangerous in terms of it will jump or kick. If you're undercutting and they catch, it can kick back, it can hurt you, it can cut you. Okay? So the drags are just as important as the teeth. Now, we've done one side. Turn it over. Same thing on the other side. So when you're doing that, you want to make sure that that face is straight and it follows the angle. Okay. Sometimes after you've cut for a day, it might be a little bit rounded. You have to file it till it goes straight. There, so that's that. Now, I have to file the drags on this side too. And that's another thing that can happen. If you file your saw both sides and file the drags on one side, it'll make that cut unevenly and you'll think something's bent. It'll make your cut curved. So you have to keep your drags uniform. Then I take it out of the vise and I clean it. I do this every day. This is one of the most important things for your saw. The stuff on the outside doesn't really have to be done, but I do it anyway. I always get stuff built up just below the muffler. So I have a wire brush that I clean that off. So the stubborn stuff that won't come off, I take a putty knife to. That's pretty good. I do the same over here. I usually do this when it's on the vise actually, but I forgot to. Just brush it off. Keep this clean so that you can get at your chain adjuster. Just give it a little brushing off. Then, before I open up the hood Give a little brush around those because stuff builds up on those and that stops air from going in to cool it. You take the cover off. The clips are handy. Some of the old saws, you didn't have those. And you can see stuff that's built up inside it. You see the chips and things that get around. And what happens, if you don't clean it, these cooling fins around the motor cylinder head fill up and they don't cool it properly. And these engines turn up at around 11 to 12,000 RPMs when they're working full out. It gets so hot. I learned the hard way my first year working full time at this. I ruined the motor in a perfectly good saw from not adequately cleaning it. So I clean them every day now. I had a little lecture from a dealer and he told me what I should be doing. So I learned from him. I take my putty knife and I go down inside those little areas there and make sure that it's free right into the cylinder head. You can feel the round part when you're scraping it. I don't use the brush very much in here because there's a magnet around the carburetor that attracts bristles and steel, and that's not a real good thing either. Don't know what the magnet's for, never asked, but I've seen the results. So this type of filter here, they recommend that you wash them in soap and water, and I do that when it gets built up because it'll kick back a little bit of stuff out of the carburetor, a little bit of oil and grit gets around it. But what I do with that every day, and it'll come apart if you have to, you can take this apart. But what I do every day is I just take my compressed air and that's good enough. Before I put it back on, I kind of cover the opening that it goes on. And I blow the dust out of that. Then I put it back on because while I'm cleaning the rest of it, I don't want dirt to go in there. That's how you can damage your motor. So this, I'll do this here. Normally I do this outside, but I'll do this here so you can see it in the light. Oh. Put the cover back on. Sometimes I have to clean the inside of the cover, but it's okay today. And I take and I blow out the channel around where the chain is. Put this saw in the office with all my other equipment. That's what I do every day for my saw maintenance. And if there's anything I missed or anything that people would like to know more about, don't hesitate to make a comment, ask me, and we'd be only too pleased to answer your questions. All right? I don't get too close to it because this is quite a powerful little compressor. There's a good reason why you shouldn't get too close to it. Hope you got that on film.
Oh yeah.